Hi, welcome back to another TerranScapes video. This video showcases a MDF terrain piece, laser cut, that is an addition to the ruined set that I showed as a work in progress earlier. This ruined set is intended for use with Infinity, and the customer added a request to finish an MDF drop pod to kind of bring a little bit of a sci-fi element to it, and line of sight blocking and all of that. I've never worked with a laser cut MDF kit before, so this was a little bit of a new experience for me, and if you haven't worked with one before yourself, you might find it kind of interesting. So let's take a closer look at it, and I can tell you a little bit about what I learned about this kit and laser cut projects in general. So this is a look at the portable utility pod from WARMILL. The portable utility pod is, as I mentioned before, is cut from laser cut MDF, and the customer asked me to do a few modifications to it. But before I go over those modifications, the customer wanted, first I asked him what color scheme should I use, and he said go right off the box. You know, the color scheme on the box, he said, was fine. So this gave me an opportunity to try to match something, you know, as close as I could, which I have never tried to do before, actually. So what I did is I paid attention to the overall color scheme, but also took a look at a lot of the weathering that they had done. And one of the things I noticed is that, let's see if I can come in, there we go, come in a little closer. You know, what they did for rust is sort of very, what's the word, I don't know, blurry is not quite right, but it's a very soft kind of rust effect. And so I thought I would go in and do some rusting, but more in the kinds of technique that I'm a little more familiar with. And the other thing I noticed is that they did a lot of line highlighting on all of the cross pieces here, and so I thought that that might be something I would emulate as well. So with that in mind, this is the piece that I came up with. Now the customer wanted not only to have it, you know, painted similarly, but also to have a couple modifications to it. Oh gosh, I haven't done the ladder yet. There will be a ladder, I think. But in any case, well, I'm still going to put this up. But in any case, one of the things he asked is that I install something along the bottom to completely block the line of sight underneath the vehicle. Now, it actually sits fairly low to the ground, but what I did is I took a couple extra pieces from the sprue, and actually, I think this is from a different sprue, but in any case, and I modified them to insert into the bottom so that, you know, when you looked at it on profile, it would block that line of sight. The other thing that the customer wanted, we had discussed actually quite a while ago, was perhaps having some kind of area on the top that could provide, you know, some cover. So what I did is I took another couple pieces of the sprue. That way I could maintain the overall thickness and the feel of the piece. And I just built a couple short barricades. So these will actually come up just over the waist, you know, about chest high on a Mini. And this area on the top is actually flat enough to support two 20mm base miniatures, so that way you could, you know, anyway, place some models on the top. And the other thing the customer wanted was to have the roof be removable. Let's see if I can do that. It is a tight fit. There we go. And so that way miniatures could be placed inside as well. So that gives you a little look at the interior. I started to try to put in some oil spots, like maybe the things that they had stored in here leaked a little bit. They weren't great, and I decided to not work on them any harder and just kind of leave it as it is. Lastly, I did a modification that I just wanted to do myself, and that was to have the door be openable. So what I did is I installed a pin for the door. And now this actually gives you a sense of what you need to consider when you go to open it. The door opens, but the hinge is slightly in from the edge, and so when you go to open it, you can't just press over here. You need to actually just rotate it just a little bit around that hinge so that it'll open. Because the hinge, if it was at the very edge here, the thickness of the door would block it from fully opening. So I just decided to put it in a little bit. So a couple things about this kit. One, the pieces fit very, very tightly. In fact, I painted it separate pieces. So because all of the side pieces, this sort of reinforcing structures, if you will, were all separated from the parts that were going to be painted yellow, I decided that it'd be quickest just to paint them all individually and then assemble it afterwards. But what I discovered is that because the fit, and you can see some of the inserts on the inside, were so tight, actually a couple of the pieces I had to shave off some of the paint to get them to fit in. And actually, while that was not great at the assembly point that I went into, I still really gave them a lot of credit for having such a tight tolerance on all of the pieces to assemble. Really thought they snapped together really well, and in fact they fit so tight I think much of this kit could be assembled without adhesives. There were a few pieces that are supported by these bars up above that might fall in, so I mean really you have to glue it, but in essence many of the pieces would not require that. So that was some of the modifications that I made to it. And well, let's put that back in. There we go. Again, you see how tight that fit is. The other thing I wanted to mention about the kit is it does an exceptional job at hiding all of those unions. The parts, like if you look at the feet from the bottom, you can see how those pegs go through it. And a lot of kits I've seen online really show how it's an MDF assembly, and you see a lot of those plugs and edges. And this kit does a fantastic job. I mean, of course, along the top line you can see that, and you can see that along the back as well, but it actually doesn't really stand out that much from the piece. You get a little bit of those end caps here, but again, that is not too, standout-ish. So really, really liked the way this kit went together and was really impressed with it. So I want to give WARMILL a little kudos for taking the time to really build a nice kit. So I did go in. Now this, all these support structures here came out a little darker than the box version. The box version has a bit of a blue in it, and I actually did mix in some blue. It's a very subtle effect on the black, however, and it came out just a little bit different. But I think the color of the yellow actually came out pretty well. And I did a big overwash of a weathering liquid to kind of darken it and dirty it up a bit, and then of course put in different areas of rust. It showed a pretty heavy amount. Let's see if I can get a good picture of that. Pretty heavy amount of rust in front of the door. And put some in leaking underneath the panels, and of course along the bottom. This was done with, oh gosh, it's been a while, Modelmate's Rust Liquid. If you are not familiar with that product, you can go back, there's the back finger, to see the review that I did of those products quite a ways back now. The last thing that I did was when I put on these top pieces here, I realized they looked awfully plain. Didn't really emulate a lot of the lines that you can see here, of course around the door, that sort of idea, and of course there's some on the panel here. So I went in and scored in a few lines to try to tie that into the piece, and that was a little tricky, but it came out all right in the end, I think. And there's a couple spots where it's a little crooked. I wished I had gotten it a little bit tighter, but it's not overly noticeable. And again, I think it just gives it quite a bit more of tying into the piece. One of the things, if I had to have any complaint about this kit, the thing that baffled me was that the floor, let's take this off for a second, I'll show you. The floor is actually detailed, right? They've got a nice pattern in there. It gives it a little bit more, visual texture. And the roof doesn't have that. Why is that? I don't know. I think a little pattern on the top would have helped tie it in. Now, it is, of course, busy with a lot of struts and whatnot across it, but it just seemed odd. And in fact, when I started to assemble it, I assumed this was the floor and that was the roof, and there's actually a very slight pin difference in the two pieces, and so I quickly realized, oh, no, that's not right, and I took a look at the directions again and counted the pins in their arrangement and realized this is the roof. Anyway, so that gives you a look at the drop pod and gives you a sense of what working with an MDF kit like this is. Of course, I don't have, the sprues to show you, but, there were these pieces literally fell out of the sprue. They were so cleanly cut, many of the pieces started to fall out on their own, and the ones that didn't were just pop them right out. They came out very well. There were a few edges that needed to be sanded just a little bit because they got a little frayed, if you will, but very, very little cleanup on this kit. Now, one thing I should mention is that this material is very, very porous. This is not a finished edge kind of MDF, so I did give it a base coat of a aerosol primer before I went in to paint it, and actually edges where I had to do modifications, I actually had to go in and do a fair amount of sanding. As I mentioned before, this is a very tight kit, and so to get this top piece to be able to be removed without destroying it and to get put back in, I had to do actually quite a bit of cleanup along its length and in some of these edges here. Where I had cleaned it, actually let me see if I can show you that. Okay, I think you can see that. You can see here where I cleaned it and then painted it over. The paint just really soaked in. I had to do a couple coats because it had been exposed away from the primer. Of course, I wasn't too worried about the appearance because once it's inserted, it's going to sit like that and you won't be able to see those edges. Last thought on this before we leave is that where there is contact, and in fact on some of the corners, because the material is a little soft, it tends to abrade fairly easily. So you can expect over time some of these edges to show a little bit of wear. Now, one of the things I noticed on the original picture is that they had done a lot of line highlighting on this. I kind of just striked all these edges with a little bolt gun to kind of just pop it out a little bit and give it a little contrast. But those will also hide some of that wear, as when I was working on it and I did get a couple abrasions on it during the assembly, those are kind of a bright, almost a white, and they'll actually blend in fairly well with some of these highlights, so they shouldn't really stand out over time. But it was something that I noticed and probably should be considered if you're working on a piece like this in the future. So that gives you an idea of the Utility Drop Pod by WARMILL and how I finished it. So that gives you a look at the kit and the drop pod, I should say. And I just want to reiterate that the the WARMILL laser cut quality is really, I think, very high. But of course, it's my first kit that I've really worked with like this. But the way it disassembled from the sprues and came together as a piece really impressed me, actually. So keep your eye on the channel, as I have 2 more pieces in this Street Wars line that I will be finishing hopefully relatively soon. So you might want to come back for that. And I have another video that I'll be shooting today, which should go up in my YouTube channel relatively shortly. So hopefully you'll come back and join me for that. And of course, questions and comments are always welcome down below, and I will talk to you soon.